All right, so we're going to do some basic exercises in painting rocks, and we're going to start over here. We're just going to wet this rock first. I might have to come back in and wet it a couple of times in order to get the right consistency of paint there, but let's get some paint on there to start. And then it doesn't matter what the shape is of the rock here, and I am working on dry. Do a variety of shapes here. Put some light over top. Okay, like so. And then maybe some burnt sienna down here. And maybe just pure water here. And let's just do pure water. Well, almost pure water. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same. I'm going to wet this one. I want this one to be damp when we start on it, so that's why I'm wetting both of them at the same time. Okay, some burnt sienna here. Okay, and then maybe this nice light color over the top. Okay, so there's the basis of my two rocks so far. And make this a bit darker at the bottom. Doesn't really matter what goes into that. I'm going to go back to this one. Just wet it again. The trick here is I want this all to be evenly wet, particularly on this rock. And I'm using a fairly thick mixture. Okay. And now I'm going to have to let that dry for a minute or two. Okay. And on this one, what we're going to do is we're just going to start adding textures. We'll start with some weird and wacky brushes. And right now it's damp, so the first texture that I'm putting on to a damp rock. This brush here is a bristle bright brush, and I'm just adding those while the rock is still damp. And some of them are showing an effect immediately, and others we're going to go in a few seconds later. So we're just starting with some texture with that brush. And then this one, let's see if it's ready. We're going to use a credit card or a palette knife, whatever you have handy, to scrape the rock. And I want to scrape out some color in some areas, and then in other areas I want to bring some color in. So I'm looking at it and it's still too wet in order to do that, so we're gonna wait a minute. We'll go back to this one where we're gonna add some more texture as it dries. I'm just picking up some ultramarine and adding that into the rock, and right now it has a very nice soft texture in there. The other thing I can do with the fan brush is I can just apply water, and the water will add some texture as well, especially in these lighter areas. So we'll let that dry. We'll go back to our credit card, and still not quite dry enough. It's starting to show some marks. If I press really hard, I can get some paint out there. I'm using the curved side right now, but it's an effective way of adding texture to rocks. The other way you can use that is you can actually apply paint to the credit card and then take that paint and put it in and kind of scrape it around. So it kind of has a dry brush effect in a way. And then the other way I can use it is I can make lines with it by pressing pretty hard, and it's going to actually take out some shapes, and I can reshape that rock. And you can try different sides of it, and that's essentially how it works. So this one has started to dry, let's try another texture. I have, if you just take any brush that you have and destroy it in the palette, I'm pushing it, circling it around, and then you can dab with this if it has enough paint on it. This one probably doesn't. There we go. So just a very subtle effect on that rock, but not quite a nice one as well. Now these two, we're gonna try salt, and then we're just gonna have watercolor create its own masterpiece, which it can help you paint if you let it. So here I'm putting in a lighter wash at the top again, and then I'm going to go darker at the bottom, picking up whatever paint I have in my palette. I find with salt it goes much lighter, so you really have to start with a dark mixture when you use salt. Okay, so we've got that in, and then again the trick here is to make sure it's evenly wet. If it's not evenly wet, then the salt won't react evenly. So I'm just trying to make sure I've got a good texture there. Make it nice and dark at the bottom here. Okay, so I think that might do the trick actually. I'm going to add a tiny bit more burnt sienna up here, because you'll see how light it goes once we add the salt. So I'm looking at it, it looks fairly even. The other thing you can do is just give it a spritz. And now it might be too wet in some areas, but that's a good exercise to see the effect of that. And then I just have to figure out where I put my salt. There we go. So now I'm gonna really concentrate on the top here. I want these to be the lightest areas. And then where I put this dark as well. So you can direct it to where you want the salt to react. And the other thing you can do is if it's not reacting, you can just take a smaller brush and just add water to a few spots. Okay, and it will start doing its thing. So that go ahead. And then the last one, I am going to wet the rock first. Okay, so it's going to be good and wet. I'm going to put in my colors that I want to use. So I think I wanted to put some pink in this one. Okay. Pink. And I wanted to put some burnt sienna. So I'm making sure the rock is very wet. Okay. So that should give me something that I can work with. And now I'm going to get it even wetter by spritzing it. Now, of course, it's going to spread all over the place for this rock, but that's okay. And that's it. It will merge. You can also do things like tilt it certain ways if I want the color to merge into one another. My salt rock isn't turning out as nice as I would like it, so I'm really going to give that a blast and see what happens. The salt is all collecting in one area. I'm really adding a lot of water to that. Okay. But I'm sure you've all seen the way salt reacts. When I did this one, in class, I mean, it turned out a lot nicer the way that the salt was very wet up here, and it wasn't as wet in that area. So we'll see. You just have to give it time. The other thing that salt will do is it will flow up and down. So if you tilt your paper, let's do it this way. You see the water flowing down. It will actually start to form in a certain way if you leave that on a slant. So let's leave that on a slant and see what happens to it. Maybe that's a better use of our salt, because it's really kind of amassed in one area. And then we can go back to this one just to finish it off. Obviously you can use splattering effects, but what other textures do we have? I think we tried the fine fan brush. The other thing you can do, this is just a oval wash brush, is if you want lines, you can use it to create fine lines. You can use, obviously, a needle brush to create lines throughout your rock. So there's just right now this is completely dry, so they're kind of creating a dry brush effect as well. All right, our next adventure is rocks. We're going to do one more style of doing rocks. And I've mixed up cerulean, a burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, a imperial purple, a tiny bit of quin yellow, I guess it's called, quin gold, sorry, pink. And then over here I've got some leftover paint, which was a bit of cobalt and a bit of indigo. So these are kind of the darker colors that I have over here. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm just going to add a little bit more indigo. There's some leftover paint there as well. So basically what we're going to do for this is we're going to make a large rock shape, and then we're going to divide that rock shape into sections, pretty much. I'm going to start with a bigger brush this time. This is one of my mop brushes, and I'm going to start by actually wetting the entire area that my rock is going to be on. Something like that. Maybe there's some rocks in front here as well. So I'm just creating a wet surface. Now at the very top of the rock, it could be capturing some light, and that's what this queen is for. You can also add a bit of blue to that, so maybe it's reflecting the sky. That works fine. And then I'm gradually going to work in to the other colors that I have here, and just, you know, move from cools to warms, combine some of these colors into a nice structure here. I have some ultramarine, and makes a nice gray if I mix that with the burnt sienna. And I'm going to continue this structure down. Maybe I'll have some more highlighted spots at the front here. So I'm just taking some plain water and wiping those out a bit. Oops, my brush. And maybe we'll do that here too. So that's kind of the way our rock is going to go around. And this is just our first wash, so it's a fairly light wash that I'm putting in. I'm trying to use all the colors that I have here. Okay, and then we'll just have it kind of finish off like that. So that is our rock. Okay, and then we're going to give that a spritz with our water bottle. I don't really want to spray the top of the rock here or the top of the rock down there. So I'm just going to cover this, spray it that way, cover this, spray it that way, cover this, and spray it that way. And it just gives some very light texture to the rock. And then I can do the same sort of thing with just taking some of this mixture that I have left on my palette. And instead of spraying, I'm gonna spatter some color here. So I'm gonna go like this, cover this part. Let's see what I got here. Sometimes what I do is I make these different patterns that I can use, different shapes. See if I can find some more of these. And I can put these shapes on to cover certain spots from splattering. Something like that, maybe that. And then I can go ahead and I'm gonna add a little bit of dark to this as well. So I don't want too much splatter up here, so I'm gonna cover that part. Okay. Something like that. And then I can alternate with the colors that I have as well. Maybe some burnt sienna. Just throw those into the rock, and down at the bottom, I can do a bit more splattering where it actually hits the bottom of the rock. Just to darken up that part. You can also use a toothbrush for this if you want more control. But that probably does the trick. Okay, so I didn't get any rock textures over here. So why don't I try to get some more over there? Some of this blue on. Okay, so I think that is a good start. And then I'm going to take a flat brush, and again I'm just going to take this entire mixture that I have here, maybe beef it up a little bit here and there. And I'm just going to identify the bottoms of the rocks and let that flow in, like so. Okay, and here I'm going to identify the bottoms. Okay, and if it's dry, I can always put a little bit of water along there, only on the top part, and let that flow up. Okay, and maybe put a little bit of blues into that as well. Starting to kind of shape the rock. With that, rinse my brush and just help that flow up here and there. Okay, and now I can start shaping the top of this rock, because I like to do this when it's fairly okay, so if anything naturally starts to appear, so here I'm kind of seeing this appear, then you can take advantage of it. Just by identifying the shapes you might see in there. And then back here, I want it to actually be a bit smaller in shape. So I'm going to put in a line, and then I'm going to soften above that. And just let this flow up. And here we have to kind of define the top of this rock. By gradually bringing that one up. Do the same over here. This to me looks like it might go up this way. And this is shaped something like this. We'll put some water or something in the background there so that that shows through. Pull that up. And then it's a good idea to have some of these with sharper edges. So here this goes down like this, and I'm going to pull down here. And that ends up helping to define this rock here. I can even do this where I add an edge that wasn't there. Okay. All right, so that defined the shape of that rock. And now we kind of need to go along here maybe. I think what I'd like to do is have this kind of run down. And then I'm going to pull this up. And I'm going to pull this up. This is the bottom of this rock. And pull this up. I'm trying to make some of my rocks here more angular. It's not working out. They're all kind of straight. Let's just make this one more angular. Some more paint on there. So I actually do not want them too round back there. It's best to have a reference photo for this, and right now I do not. Okay, so this is quite dark at the bottom of this. And maybe what I do with this one is it has some shapes in it. That kind of thing helps you see where the rock is going. and putting directional lines like this. Using that to create some direction works as well. Okay. All right, so now we're down to the second part. And I think before we go there, we need to darken up this part. So I'm going into the ultramarine, I'm going into the burnt sienna, and here I'm just emphasizing these shapes. Okay, and then I'm going to pull that back up to the top. Cleaning up the brush. Same with this one, I want this to have a angular shape. Like that. Okay, so it's starting to take shape. Here I need a few more shapes in this part of the rock. I want it to look like it's going up. We have some lines going across. And this should go right back. We'll put in some background that will help define the top of those, but for now, I think we're okay. This is too repetitive. We have 1, 2, 3. So now I have to break this up somehow. Okay. Not really helping to break it up at all. In fact, I'm making it more the same. Maybe we go like this, and then we'll get rid of that part there. Something like that. Okay, so I'm just going back into where it's already dark, and I'm adding darker portions to it. Okay, so I think that's all right. Let's move to our front rock now. Okay, and our final exercise is to use saran wrap. So what I'm going to do is just put a big wash on this paper. Use a bit more paint here. Okay. And then just trying to create kind of a rocky pattern with all this paper or paint that I have on my palette. Okay. And I probably have to tape it down a bit here because it's not really holding. Let's clip it here and here. Okay. And then I'll just tape it on this side like this. Okay, so we need a bit more paint on there. Let's try to use up everything we have here. Put some patterns on it. Okay, maybe this pink mixed with this yellow. And with more of this blue. Indigo. Okay, so we got some patterns. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a dark color. Let's take indigo. And I'm going to go like this. This is kind of going to be my rock pattern that I want to imitate. And there's some rocks like this. Okay, so I've got the basics here. That orange is a bit overpowering, isn't it? A little bit of purple in there. Okay, so there's our basics. I'm going to grab some cellophane. Some here. Okay. Make sure this is all nice and wet. Actually, I might go in a little bit darker with the indigo again. Okay. Doesn't matter really, that it's just that these are, by doing it this way, you can mimic the shape that you purposely want to put on a rock. I'll add some pink here. And I'm just going to spritz it on the outside because I think the outsides are not really that wet. Ooh, that's a vivid pink. Okay, and now I'm going to take my cellophane and I'll lay it on top. I can tell almost immediately if it's wet enough. And then I'm going to take, if it's not sticking, it's not wet enough in that area. And then I'm going to take it and try to go along these veins that I drew on. So I'm just pinching in the veins, and that will help make a pattern on the rock that is the same as what I want. Okay. And then if it's not sticking at all, you can tell that that part is not wet enough. What you can do is you can just press it down or spritz it. If you need to, you could throw some paint in there. So here it wasn't very wet at all. So throw some paint in there and then squish up the paper. Same with this part, wasn't really wet. Apply some water, color, doesn't really matter what color we use here. And then wrinkle the paper. I still can see my black lines, and then let that dry. Put it in a safe place to dry, and you have to wait until it's completely dry. My saran wrap rocks have now dried, and this is the finished effect that we got from them. You can create other patterns with this as well, and or just use it like this and define the cracks in the rocks much darker, and either method works well. Okay, so we're going to continue with the front rock. I switched brushes. I'm using my Escoda Perla because these rocks are a bit closer, and I like using this one as my blending brush. Every once in a while I'm going to go in and just do that, use it as well as my brush that makes these marks. Generally, if it's shading, you soften up this bottom part, but if it's the shape of the rock, then you can use those hard edges that can be made by this brush. So I'm trying to put in some divisions here alternating back and forth with these brushes. These rocks are closer up, so they're going to be a bit bigger than the rocks you already saw. I'm going to try to get some that are more square in shape. Maybe we go like this. I have a tendency with my brain to not go square, so I have to force myself to do that. I think that worked okay. So I'm just going to blend this up like that. It's probably could be a bit squarer across here. And here, of course, I can go nice and dark. Here I can go nice and dark. Not really sure what this is here, but let's make that square like that. And then we can, well, it's not square, is it? Let's make this like this. Okay. I could make it square at the bottom too, sometimes that helps. Okay, and then the next level up, this all appears fairly dark here, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have this organic shape go like this. Maybe this goes down there and then goes up there. Maybe have a smaller rock down there. But I like this big organic shape at the top. Something like that. And then I'm just looking for something else that I can do there. I could go this way. Okay. Make that part kind of squarish. I've now cut it right in half, which is not really a good idea, so we'll go like that. So it appears that this rock is kind of flat, which I kind of like. It's going to get some shading from the rock that's in front of it. So we'll do that. And I'm going to put a rock here. It's going to go like that. Guess that's all right. Something like that. So that is our shapes. Now, what we want to do is try to get some really dark spots in here. I'm just throwing in this mixture of burnt sienna. Let's make this one a little squarer. And then I can also go into my ultramarine blue, throw some of that in. Maybe this is creating quite a big shadow with this one. Same thing here. Sharp lines along there. Sharp. Okay. Maybe not as much of a shadow there. Sharp here. So that's kind of the structure that I've made. A bit more burnt sienna into this gray where it looks too, it's a good idea to vary it though, to go from brown to blue, have some variation, which is fine. Now the top of this rock, this part here, has virtually no texture, but it would be getting the sun, and we probably should put something in there. So I think what I'm going to do is take my flat brush, and I'm just going to start by putting some of this brown that I had up here into it with the flat brush. Test it out on my paper, make sure I'm getting a nice flat brush mark. Okay, it's not really coming off at all. Sometimes you can just, make it, rub it hard to get those textures on. is pretty light, but we've used the dry brush to put some mixtures in there, and if you don't like some of that, you can always just really rub it off with your dry brush. Maybe I want this to be whiter right here. Maybe it's getting the sun here as well. Maybe here. So I'm now rubbing out instead of adding in. Maybe here it's catching some light. Here it's catching some light. I can get rid of that mark that I didn't really like. Yeah, the other question is, you know, color harmony. I had a lot of cerulean up here in this part. Putting some of that in to the bottom. I can use cerulean as my shading color, maybe down here. Something like that. It's not a very clean brush, so let's clean it off a bit. Like this almost looks like it's cerulean mixed with ultramarine. Let's try a bit of that. You can use your finger, you can wipe it out with a cloth, whatever works. And we need a bit of this brown in here too, this burnt sienna, really light burnt sienna. So we can put some of that there. Use the dry brush technique maybe down here. Something like that. So it kind of goes from cool to warm, to blah, to warm. And we can improve the blah a bit. Let's try that. So that is basically the method. The other thing you can do is you can use different effects. This is a Mr. Clean. If I really want to clean up some of these bright spots, I can just use the Mr. Clean and really scrub it to get those out. Maybe not too much scrubbing, but enough. Something like that. And then the other thing I can do is I can use a lighter splatter. So we wanted some cerulean. I can use that, maybe a little bit of pink. I can use that. And that's pretty much it. Okay, so this one has completely dried. You see that where it stuck on the paint, it stayed there, but it created these patterns where it lifted off. And we're left with a very interesting texture in the rocks. And what you can do with that texture is just start leveraging it. So if I wanted to have, let's say, a gray marking throughout this one, I would just go in and put that marking in. If I wanted to make these veins here a different color, I could just go in and drop that color on, but it gives you a nice pattern to work with. And obviously that's a bit too dark, but creates a nice structure to the rock and a nice texture. I would say here, we probably should have went in quite a bit darker. Even the black that I put down earlier doesn't come out quite as black, but I love these textures in the middle of the rocks. My saran wrap rocks have now dried, and this is the finished effect that we got from them. You can create other patterns with this as well, and or just use it like this and define the cracks in the rocks much darker, and either method works well.